most of you have got a cup of tea or coffee to hand. And if you do, I would just really love it if you could get it and put it in your hands and cup it, if you like, and hold on to it. I was in a webinar with Ruth Rice and Naomi Dickerson a little while ago, and they were talking about well-being. And one of the first things they said is about taking the opportunity to sit and just hold your mug like that, and to realise and remember that you are held in God's hands. Whether you are full to the brim or whether you are empty, you are in God's hands. And for our own well-being, if we're going to try and come alongside children, young people and families, one of the most important things is that our well-being is being looked after. And that will be through a variety of ways. I need to try and move my images. So Sarah Stewart-Brown, a professor of public health and a well-being expert, says this: feeling happy is part of mental well-being, but it's far from the whole. Feelings of contentment, enjoyment, confidence and engagement with the world are all part of mental well-being. Self-esteem and self-confidence are too. Of course, good mental well-being does not mean that you never experience feelings or situations that you find difficult, but it does mean that you feel that you have the resilience to cope when times are tougher than usual. So just like you to hold that mug, and we're going to pray. Lord God, we thank you and we praise you that you hold us and you have us. And whether we are feeling particularly empty today, whether we are feeling anxious today, whether we are feeling on top of the world today, you've got us and you won't let us go. Thank you that it is through your strength that we sometimes have the resilience to cope when times are tougher than usual. Help us to place our trust in you, our hope in you, that you may carry us through all that we have to face. In Jesus' name, amen. Right, my computer has decided to, there we go. So, the professor carries on by saying it can help to think about well-being as something you do rather than something you are. So the more you put in, the more you are likely to get out. No one can give well-being to you. It is you who has to take action. And that's really hard because there is sometimes where we think we just want somebody to make it all better. But actually, well-being happens from the individual, and you have to work at it. You have to take time. You have to do things practically. And when we're thinking about children, young people and families, we are there to resource, to give tools, to listen, to do all of those things, but acknowledge that we cannot change their situations. We have to be the ones who are facilitating. You may well be fully aware of this poem, which talks about the external surroundings of a child. If a child lives with criticism, they learn to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. If children live with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If children live with encouragement, they learn confidence. If children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. If children live with fairness, they learn justice. If children live with security, they learn to have faith. If children live with approval, they learn to like themselves. If children live with acceptance and friendship, they learn to find love in the world. Children learn what they live. You may have particular experiences of some or all of those, and the children with whom we work, the young people with whom we work, they will have those external factors around them. And the thing is that there is what's called positive stress, there is tolerable stress, and then there is toxic stress. Positive stress is, we've got an exam tomorrow. We need that bit of adrenaline. For me, I've had positive stress this morning. This is not my comfort zone. I've had a bit of positive stress, but actually that's good because it gets you through and it gets you driven and gets you excited, and there's an adrenaline there within it. Tolerable stress is that stress that you don't necessarily know how to deal with, but you will deal with it, and it is relatively short-lived, even if it may carry on for a while. That's sort of a juxtaposition, but the example there is the loss of a family member. And you will feel that within, but there is that sense of life carrying on. Toxic stress, however, is when that just does not go away. And we're going to have a little look here. We've got the impact of stress. A positive stress, as we said, gives that adrenaline. Tolerable stress, it does drain you. But actually, once that's over, there is that resting period. Toxic stress, however, is intense, it's repeated, and it's unaddressed. And that's the big thing, it's unaddressed. And this is what's happening within the brain. You have there, you've got your healthy response. So you're going along where it says at rest. You're not literally at rest in bed, having a good old rest. You are just going through the motions of every day. And actually, you're not on this roller coaster. You are just at a level playing field. That's the nice place to be. Something comes into life. You could call it a threat. You could call it whatever it is, but something impacts life going at an even keel. Now, that will be a different thing for different people. That could be for somebody who is actually a bit more exhausted trying to work out what to have for tea. And it could be that last thing that actually floors them. For somebody else, it will be the car won't work. For somebody else, it will be a death. There's all sorts of things that come in to be that threat. And what happens to the body is you go into a fight, flight, or freeze mode. Some will overcompensate and go into this drive. Some will just want to get into bed, put the duvet over their head and try and pretend that it's not happening. Others, they freeze and they find it difficult to carry on with anything, and they just need to stop. What happens with most of that is the threat comes, the adrenaline and the fight, flight, and freeze happens, but the threat goes away, and you are left with the exhaustion and the recovery, but you come back down into that place of rest again, and life carries on. For somebody who's going to go into toxic stress, the trauma doesn't go away. So whether that is domestic abuse, whether that is what they're witnessing in the home, whether that is a verbal abuse, whatever it might be, that trauma carries on happening. And it means that you're carrying that all the time. Now, I've explained that in a particular way, but we're going to watch a little clip to see what happens and how this is particularly relevant for some of our children.
The reality is that we all need a certain amount of stress, a certain amount of anxiety to perform well. If we don't care about that exam that we're going to have tomorrow, we'll probably fail. If we're going to cross the street and a truck is coming at us, we have release of adrenaline. We have release of a hormone that we call cortisol. We want to jump out of there, and adrenaline and cortisol are going to help us do that. So there's that good amount of stress. But if all day long you're feeling like a truck is coming at you, day after day after day, that's going to take a toll on the body.
So the kid next to them hits them, or the teacher reprimands them in a way that they're uncomfortable with, right? Literally what they're feeling, that activation is like there was a truck coming at them.
So to live life as if a truck is coming towards you is a really difficult place to be. But for some of our children and young people, that is what life is like. They just do not know what is around the corner, and they do not know what's going to face them. So for some, lockdown has been horrific because their safe place was school. And they come into school knowing that they've got to go back into that place where they feel like the truck is coming towards them. And part of what we need to do, if we're able to work within the school setting especially, is how do we give them tools and resources? Because they are literally living all the time at that fixed, loaded place. Now, the reality is, in the first 2 years, a baby's brain grows from 25% of its size to 80% of its adult size. And that development continues in childhood. And they learn, that's why we use that poem at the beginning, they learn empathy, they learn trust, and they learn community. But if all they've got around them is criticism and negativity and angst, that is developing constantly, and they're not learning those skills of empathy, trust, and community. And so their higher cognitive function is much, much lower than a child who is being surrounded by those good things. Now, there is so much taking place in Wales at the moment, and it is so exciting. A lot of this information that you've got on the slides today comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences and the Cymru Well Wales resource that has gone into schools. And all schools and all teachers and all support staff, they are being trained in adverse childhood experiences. So what are ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? These experiences include things like physical and spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect. It involves things where the child is the caregiver. And you'd be surprised at how many carers we have in our primary and junior and secondary schools. It involves where there is mental illness and household violence. And what all of the research has shown is that the more ACEs a child experiences, the more likely they are to suffer with their ill health later in life, suffering from things like heart disease and diabetes in particular. And toxic stress explains how those ACEs get under the skin. For there are some who will have ACEs, and we'll go through exactly what the ACEs are in a second. They have ACEs, but life can turn out okay. But for those who have ACEs and that stress completely and utterly overwhelms, and that will be things like racism and community violence, where there is no supportive adults around them, it causes almost irreversible toxic stress. And as it's got here, the effect would be similar to revving a car engine for days or weeks at a time. So here we've got the ACEs in Wales. In Wales, they've categorised that there are 9 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We've got abuse on the one side, which categorises as physical, sexual, and verbal. And then on the other side, you've got environmental factors. You've got separation and divorce, bereavement, increased use of alcohol in the house, increased use of drugs, an incarcerated parent or parents, and domestic abuse. it is likely, we'll go through some of the statistics in a moment, but it is likely that most children will have at least one ACE. And certainly if you go through that list, you may well have experienced at least one, if not more, of those. In Wales, there are a number of reports and resources that have been published. All of these are to help us and to educate us in what is happening for our children, young people and families. And it is really good for us to be aware of the situations that we are working with, because there are so many with whom we are working with who have that wonderful phrase when you say, "How are you?" and they say, and we could probably say it in unison, "I'm fine." And what we don't know is what is going on behind the scenes, or what is being impacted on top of what to make life more difficult for them. If you think just a moment of lockdown, you had potentially parents living on their own, single parents. You had children with maybe additional needs. You had parents with children with additional needs living in small flats with no outdoor space. On top of that, they were being asked to homeschool. The impact was increasing and increasing. And so whilst the child might not have had ACEs, there are a number of issues that we just need to be aware of the pressures that people were being put under during these strange times. And a lot of people still feel under that pressure now. So we've got here some very clear statistics. Adults in Wales have been exposed to ACEs. And here we've got some of the if you go under the child maltreatment, you've got 23 of us will have experienced verbal abuse, 17% of us will have experienced physical abuse, 10% sexual abuse. When you look at things that happen in the household, 20% will have experienced parental separation, 16% domestic violence, 14% mental illness, 14% alcohol abuse, 5% drug abuse, and 5% incarceration. And that's for the adults who are providing care and nurture for our children. No one is exempt from having experienced adverse childhood experiences. But what the Welsh ACEs study showed was that for every 100 adults in Wales, 47 have suffered at least one ACE during their childhood. And this is where it gets quite significant. 14 have suffered 4 or more. And it's when people have suffered 4 or more that the statistics get much higher in terms of what happens for an individual later in life, in terms of their health, in terms of what they can cope with, and in terms of how they react and their resilience, if you like, to what's going on. So the increase for those with 4 or more ACEs, they are 4 times more likely to be a high-risk drinker, 6 times more likely to have had or caused unintended teenage pregnancy, 6 times more likely to smoke e-cigarettes or tobacco, 6 times more likely to have had sex under the age of 16, 11 times more likely to have smoked cannabis, 14 times more likely to have been a victim of violence over the last 12 months, 15 times more likely to have committed violence against another person in the last 12 months, 16 times more likely to have used crack cocaine or heroin, and 20 times more likely to have been incarcerated at any point in their life. They're quite stark statistics. And that's that information really in a more pictorial diagram for you. For in terms of health, those with 2 or more ACEs are likely to develop diabetes, heart disease, respiratory illnesses. This is the impact of what is happening. And so I just want to show you, here you can see our ACEs child and how he grows up. And you've got our ACEs child on the far left of your screen. You've got him there as a teenager. You've got what he might become, and you've got what change might happen.
My parents don't understand. All the drinking and fighting means I'm scared. I'd like a cuddle, perhaps a bedtime story, but mostly I'd like them to stop shouting at me. And sometimes they hit me. Feeling scared every day and not feeling loved or wanted will change me for the rest of my life. Later, I'll have problems at school, problems with alcohol, and I'll get in trouble with the police. What's happening to me right now means I'm more likely to have serious health problems in middle age and die sooner than I should. Doctors say my life is full of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. But in my world, this means I see my dad hitting my mum. Dad's got a drinking problem, and mum's always crying, even with the tablets. I am always being shouted at and hit. After the booze and fags, there's not a lot of money for toys or clothes, or even food. I'm getting used to being scared all the time. Now I'm just angry. The doctors say things are changing inside me. My brain isn't learning how to control my feelings properly. My body can't relax like those kids who don't have ACEs, so my body won't be able to repair itself properly when I get older, making it more likely I'll get cancer or heart disease as an adult. It hurts when my parents hit me, but the real damage is hidden, and that damage will be with me for life.
I drink and smoke. They say I'm out of control, but I'm not. It's just my way of coping with my ACEs. I've been in plenty of fights, but what's wrong with that? Kids' punches don't hurt half as much as when my dad hits me. I beat up a kid last week at school because he looked at me weird. Who cares? I ended up with more time out of school. Learning's not for me anyway, and the teachers don't care any more than my parents. I don't like the way anyone looks at me except my girl. She's 16 and pregnant, just like my mum was with me.
So this is where I've ended up. I've got diabetes and cancer's probably on the way. I know these kill you, but I couldn't do without them. I've never had a proper job and I've spent time inside. I hate my kids. I hate their mum too, until she left, so my kids have grown up with ACEs. And now my daughter had her first kid. She's 16. The course of my life was set in the wrong direction a long time ago. I know where I'm heading, and sadly I know where my kids are heading too. This doesn't have to happen. A little help in childhood makes a big difference to where life takes you. When I was a baby, the nurses noticed that my mum wasn't coping and helped her and explained how important my childhood is to the rest of my life. So, with a bit of help, she coped. The police came round after next door complained about the noise from Mum and Dad fighting. They asked how I was feeling. I told them I was scared all the time. Mum and Dad got help. The shouting got better and the hitting stopped. I even got some bedtime stories. I still had problems at school, but the teacher asked me about what was happening at home. I got help controlling my feelings. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I'm now married with 2 children, and I've got a job, most of the time. I haven't repeated the same problems with my kids. We got help when being a parent got too much. Our children are ACE-free, and that means their kids stand a good chance of growing up ACE-free as well. Almost half the people in England and Wales experienced one ACE as a child, and 1 in 10 of us suffered 4 or more ACEs. If we stop ACEs, millions of children would not become smokers or binge drinkers, and levels of violence in adults would be cut in half. Fewer ACEs in childhood also means fewer adults developing diseases like cancer, heart disease and diabetes in middle age. We all need to be ACE aware. Are you? Doctors, police, nurses, teachers, firefighters and most importantly parents. The more you know about ACEs, the more you can help stop children growing up with ACEs in their lives. And for those of you who have already suffered ACEs, the more you know, the more you can help yourself and others who have suffered ACEs cope.
There was a comment that was made during that where the child said, "I'm getting used to feeling scared." And for a lot, whether that is a child, a young person, or an adult, that is the reality of when our emotional well-being is not good, is that you are getting used to feeling not good. And almost justifying it and saying that's okay. And the reality is it's not okay. It's not okay for us to be getting used to feeling as if you're walking on eggshells or as if you're just not coping. Now in children who experience trauma can find it hard to communicate emotions. And that's no different for our parents and our adults as well. They will be triggers. And when we start looking at people's life and we start looking at their behaviour, when we start asking the question, what's life like for that other person, instead of addressing the behaviour and saying, well, what's wrong with you to make you do that? There's a huge turn and a twist. So instead of looking at the behaviour and saying, what's wrong with you? To actually turning and saying, what's happened to you? So whether that is somebody who normally has a calm disposition, a parent or a co-worker who normally has a calm disposition and suddenly snaps at you, and our immediate action going, what's wrong with you? Maybe we need to change the question and say, what has happened to you? You see, these are some of the things that might be happening on the top layer of what can be seen. And this will be for any one of us. I know for many of my church congregation, their well-being has been seriously affected by being in lockdown. And a key part of that for a number of my congregation have been the loss of appetite or the overeating. That's how it's translated. For some, they have become more withdrawn. Some have become more anxious. Within the school context, there is the hitting of peers, being tired, having difficulty making friends. And those are the things that, whether you're a youth worker, a children's worker, a families worker, a community worker, a teacher, you can see those things happening. The things that we can't see happening are the things that are happening behind closed doors often. And those are the things that we've got here, whether there are mental health difficulties within the home, neglect and physical abuse, where life is difficult between parents or parental separation. And you can see all of those things, they're happening under the surface. And the effect of those, as we've seen in that video that we watched, people become anxious, they become poor learners, they're always prepared for that flight or flee experience. They become hypervigilant, edgy, hot-tempered, difficult building relationships, impulsive, and sometimes disengaged. Now, those things can happen whether or not you've had trauma. Sometimes you just have difficulty building relationships. But it's as we get to know the children, family, and young people that we are working with that these things start to become on our radar. And we start to ask our question, what is going on there for those people and young people? And the good news for us is that we can be part of, I say the solution, but we can be part of the good news. because there are gestures that can heal. And as people within church life, we have a very, very significant role to play. We can be the ones who go in to encourage the teaching staff. You know, they have to pull them up on discipline. They have to do all those things. When we go into the schools, when we're allowed back in, some already are, some aren't. But to encourage and to celebrate and to, I had the privilege of doing an online assembly with the children for Harvest. And it was great because it just gave me that opportunity to say well done for all the children, because not only were they back in school and they were thriving, but they were also still bringing stuff in for the food bank and contributing to other organisations and helping others in another way. And they needed to be congratulated and celebrated for that. There is a whole thing about comfort, staying calm, being that calm presence. So if you have links with your teachers, it really is important to be sending in maybe an email every now and again saying, we've got your back, we are praying for you, we are encouraging you, and we are so grateful for you. That feeds into collaboration, making sure that you're saying to schools, okay, we might not come in, but what can we do for you? Inspiring, coming up with new ways of doing, listening. These are all gestures that can heal with young people, with families taking that time to be with them. And for all of this, it reduces the effects of the ACEs and the toxic stress. There's a range of responses. These are some of the ones that maybe go into the more professional sphere, but we're going to be looking at in a very short while some of the things that we can very practically do. But it talks there about mental health professionals, meditation, physical exercise, spending time, nature, all the different ways. But over on that right-hand side, it says this: fostering strong, responsive relationships. And that is what we need to be doing with the children, young people and families with whom we have contact with. Relationships that actually are valuable. Relationships that mean that when the rubber hits the road, we are there and they know we are there and they can come to us and we are going to them. So a lot of what we need to be about is about breaking the cycle so that healing can occur, so that there are stable, nurturing relationships, so that this doesn't have to be a vicious cycle. I don't know how many reverse poems you have heard, but listen to this one.
I'm going to end up in prison too, just because my dad's there. You're wrong if you think there are other possibilities for me. I know a criminal breeds a criminal. It's not true. There's good in everyone. My dad's a bad person. Don't think that it could be different for me. That's where I'm going. Doing well at school, finding a good job, that's not important to me. Being in a gang, getting into fights is what matters. Listening to me, you should just write me off. And don't ever believe I want to succeed. I've dropped out. I'm out of reach. Don't assume that I can become anything. You see, the script of my life has already been written. Don't dare to say there's still hope for me. If things were done differently, there could be potential. It's over. Unless you reverse your thinking, totally turn around how you see me, and don't believe it's over. There could be potential if things were done differently. There's still hope for me. Don't dare to say the script of my life has already been written. You see, I can become anything. Don't assume that I've dropped out. I'm out of reach. I want to succeed. And don't ever believe you should just write me off. Listening to me is what matters. Getting into fights, being in a gang, that's not important to me. Finding a good job, doing well at school, that's where I'm going. It could be different for me. Don't think that my dad's a bad person. There's good in everyone. It's not true a criminal breeds a criminal. I know there are other possibilities for me. You're wrong if you think just because my dad's there, I'm going to end up in prison too.
breaking the cycle is key for so many of our children and young people who live with ACEs. The next little clip we're going to see shows where a neighbourhood comes together and in that collaborative way changes the life for a whole community.
Hi, this is my neighborhood. I grew up in this building. This is a great community now, but it's had its share of problems. When I was a kid, our community had high unemployment, a lack of resources for families, and lots of kids hanging out with no adult supervision. You might have heard about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and neglect, that can increase risk for future problems. But they don't have to. The good news is that ACEs and their consequences can be prevented. Take me, for example. I was at risk for ACEs, and despite all the things that put me at risk, some pretty incredible people helped make sure that I wouldn't become another statistic. Come on, I'll show you around. That's Jackson. He's a cool kid. His dad left when he was 2, and his mom works 2 jobs. I hang out with him every Thursday night and help him with his homework. Sometimes we grab ice cream. It's fun. Plus, he has another adult role model to learn from and trust. That's Mr. Martino. When I was a kid, he let me help him at the store sometimes after school when my parents were working late. He did that for a bunch of us. My dad actually found his job as a mechanic because of Mr. Martino. This helped our family in so many ways. Not only did my dad have a steady paycheck, which eased his stress about paying rent and buying necessities like food and clothes, but he was also a lot nicer to me, my brother, and my mom once he started working a job that made him feel good about himself. When communities come together, they can do so much to prevent ACEs. Mr. Martino and other local business owners put together a series of career workshops to help people like my dad find work. My mom also got a job with a company that allowed her to work from home and spend more time with me and my brother. Mariana has just gotten out of a class about handling challenges of single parenting. The clinic offers free childcare so Mariana's daughter, Ella, can play while Mariana's in class. The class helps parents like Mariana develop positive parenting skills, not just for babies and toddlers, but for teenagers too. This is another way our community has come together to give families the resources they need, and just one more way to prevent ACEs. This was my school, Riverside Middle, right in the heart of town. These kids are here for a sponsored summer camp. This community-supported program helps families with affordable, quality childcare and helps kids get tutoring and learn life skills. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at this school all year long. There was one counselor, Miss Greer, who I remember more than anyone. She was a really good listener. Miss Greer helped me and my brother get involved in after-school activities like baseball and soccer. Our coaches were super nice and were mentors to us. Staying after school for practice kept us and a lot of other kids out of trouble. When schools help take responsibility for preventing ACEs, everybody wins. My life could have gone in a completely different direction. Studies show that ACEs can have long-term negative effects on kids' health and well-being that may last into adulthood and even continue in future generations. But by people and groups taking action, ACEs can be prevented. In fact, there are 5 known strategies that help stop ACEs before they even start. You can implement them in your own community, just like we did. How? By strengthening economic support for families, by changing social norms to support parents in positive parenting, by providing quality care and education early in life, by enhancing parenting skills to promote healthy child development, and by intervening to lessen harms and prevent future risk. So, now you know my story, and you've seen the prevention strategies in my community that helped me beat the odds. I had healthy relationships with my family and friends. I learned how to take care of myself and make good choices. And today, I'm a mentor to other kids who need some extra help so they don't become an ACEs statistic. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are essential to prevent child abuse and neglect and to assure that all kids reach their full potential. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Banana split? You got it.
One of the key things that came out of that was about working collaboratively with community. So it's looking at what we can offer. What can we do? How can we be really proactive in all of this? And just before we go through a couple of suggestions, just to have this is the last clip I'm going to show you, but have a look at this one. It's another reverse poem, and personally, I love it.
I am a mistake, and I reject the idea that God defines me and loves me. I do not find my worth in those words. People tell me I am special, but they are wrong. It's a lie. I will be lonely forever and never find true love. They say that Jesus loves us and cares about us. This cannot be true because I am worthless. For so long, I believed in the distorted idea that there is a hope and a future for me. Now I look around and it is evident. Jesus is not enough. For so long, I thought true love could be found. But now I realize that no one will ever love me. I used to believe that my life has divine purpose. I soon realized life is empty and meaningless. No one can heal the pain, the broken hearts, and the shattered dreams I have endured. God and His love fails. His love for me never existed. The healing, purpose, and love in my life I always sought was so far off. I have come to the conclusion that life is meaningless and has no purpose. I refuse to believe that Jesus loves me. That is how I used to live my life. But then Jesus flipped the script. Jesus loves me. I refuse to believe that life is meaningless and has no purpose. I have come to the conclusion that was so far off. The healing purpose and love in my life I always sought existed. His love for me never fails. God and His love can heal the pain, the broken hearts, and the shattered dreams I have endured. No one life is emptiness and meaningless. I soon realized my life has divine purpose. I used to believe that no one will ever love me, but now I realize that true love could be found. For so long I thought, Jesus is not enough. Now I look around and it is evident. There is a hope and a future for me. For so long I believed in the distorted idea that I am worthless. This cannot be true because Jesus loves us and cares about us. They say that I will be lonely forever and never find true love. They are wrong. It's a lie. People tell me I'm special, but I do not find my worth in those words. God defines me and loves me, and I reject the idea that I am a mistake.
God defines me and loves me. So what can we do? In very, very practical terms, what can we do? Well, there's been some fantastic research and a resource put together by TLG, Transforming Lives for Good, called the Emotional Roller Coaster, Emotional Wellbeing and First Aid. We're going to be hosting a bespoke training for those in South Wales on the 18th of January. Really encourage you to come because that particular training looks at how we can do mentoring within our schools and with the children and young people in our care. It talks about ACEs, but in a very, very small way, but focuses very much on how we roll that roller coaster with the children and young people in our care and how we engage with them. Prayer Spaces in Schools. If you haven't been to Prayer Spaces in Schools website, go there. They have been absolutely fantastic during lockdown, not just about how you do prayer spaces in schools, which is obviously much more difficult at the moment, but what do prayer spaces in a bag look like? Prayer spaces in a box, local lockdown prayer spaces, outdoor prayer spaces, and prayer spaces at home. resourcing and equipping our children and young people to have that bit of time where, even though we might not use these words, but that they get their mug, they feel as if they are being held and they know they are secure. Prayer spaces in schools have had such amazing results, because even though you don't necessarily talk about God specifically, they have a space where they can connect, and God just shows up and does his stuff, and it's fantastic. And it can be so straightforward, from that image there where you just got post-it notes and people are writing things, to much more elaborate. You can see there the one across, there are all mirrors, and it talks about self-identification and who are you, and who has God created you to be. And that bottom one there is all about letting go and giving God your worries as you listen to some music and you write stuff down. Prayer spaces in schools is such an easy, I say it's an easy option. If you haven't yet got a foot in the door of your school and you offer them prayer spaces in school that is about a nurturing environment, it fits completely with curriculum, especially here in Wales, you are ticking so many boxes for the school. One of the ones that I haven't got up here, but we were talking earlier about coming alongside and encouraging and equipping families. There is so much stuff coming out of Kids Matters, and there is so much stuff coming out of Care for the Family. But for you, particularly, being able to, if you haven't yet looked at this resource, Together at Home, they have got some fantastic resources about how we share the love of Jesus in the home. One of the ideas that we didn't actually get it from here, but they're also doing it, which is great, is a nativity trail. You might not be able to have lots of families into your church building this Christmas, but again, this is about collaboration. We've been around our local village. We've got 14 businesses signed up. They are going to hide a little nativity character in the window of one of their shops. The schools are signed up, and they're going to encourage the children to go around with their little activity sheet, find the nativity characters, and we're hoping to get that linked up to our website so that they can find out more information. I'm still working on the technology side of all of that though, and my technology isn't the best. But there are just so many resources out there for us to be able to engage really effectively, to offer whether mentoring as a possibility, whether being able to host some sort of parenting courses. The options are endless.